Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started with tonight's public forum on the casino impact efforts here in East Longmeadow. My name is Nick Bro. I'm the town administrator, work out of the Board of Selectmen's office, and seated to my left is Mr. George Kingston, who is a member of the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, Community Preservation, and probably a few others as well, but is here this evening in his capacity as the town's appointee representative to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. The commission has been an important part of the process, and we'll get into that a little bit into the presentation. But thank you for being here. I am also would like to extend regrets from Selectman Angela Thorpe and the full Board of Selectmen for that matter. Selectman Thorpe, when planning this public forum, she is the board's liaison for the casino issue, could not have predicted that she would need to be attending a personal matter. And for those of you who watch the Board of Selectmen meetings, you may have noticed that last week she participated in that meeting remotely in this room, and unfortunately she was unable to be able to do so this evening. So she has left it in our hands to bring the information to you. Likewise with the Board of Selectmen Federici and Selectman Baranski, they knew that this date would not be available for them because of previously scheduled commitments on their part. But we are here and we're pleased to bring information to you about the casino efforts to date, and just a little bit of an overview. And if on your way in you may have seen there are printed copies. The printing may be a bit small, we're trying to save on paper, but if you wanted to follow right along here, Don, I don't know if it might be better if the light were off. The front one maybe? Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a little bit of an outline, and we'll make every effort not to go verbatim on the slides here, but we want to just give you an idea of the Massachusetts expanding gaming law, what it is to be a host or surrounding impacted community and what those designations mean, funding sources for mitigation of costs that would be associated for a surrounding impacted community. Then just to give the public an idea of what have been the efforts here in East Longmeadow on behalf of the town government's efforts, that is to stay on top of the issue, become educated about the casino issue and process, and to find out and to get in line to become a surrounding impacted community to protect East Longmeadow's interests. And then we'll talk about some of the next steps towards getting that designation. And finally, we will open this up to questions and answers with the forum. So I would ask that you indulge us to go through the presentation and hold on to your questions until the end, and we'll continue on. So November 22nd, 2011, the governor signs the Massachusetts expanded gaming law. It set about the process for a casino operator to apply. It set up a 5-member gaming commission, an ombudsman to act as a liaison between the commission and communities and other stakeholders, and so forth, the employment process, construction process, etc. There is a host of a very, very large amount of knowledge that is available to the public. If you wanted to find out more, I would encourage you to go to massgaming.com, and you can learn about quite a bit about the process as well.
I might just add that one of the commissioners is Bruce Stebbins, who is an ex-East Longmeadow resident and who is very familiar with the area. We're very lucky to get Bruce on the commission because he's aware of Western Massachusetts and what the issues are out here, and particularly the towns of Longmeadow and East Longmeadow.
Great, thank you. Host community designation. So what is a host community? It's simply where the community where the casino or the slot facility will be located. That's an obvious one, I'm sure, to everybody here. It allows for the ability to develop and negotiate agreements, and to also have the referendums. It calls for the host community to have referendums on whether or not the citizens of that community want to host a casino. And the efforts here in Western Massachusetts, there were several communities that considered different proposals throughout this process. Most recently, well, you can see that there were votes in July in Springfield. They voted to approve it. Palmer rejected it in September. Most recently, West Springfield rejected it in September, and Palmer most recently rejected it a week ago. And from what I understand, there is still an effort to look for a recount. I didn't see on the news, and it may have been announced that a date, but I don't have one as of yet.
November 26th.
November 26th? Thank you. So there you go. The surrounding impacted community designation. A surrounding impacted community is one that is approximately located to the host community. And the casino applicants are required to submit signed agreements between them and the surrounding communities. And it's set forth certain conditions for mitigation. And there also has to be documented public outreach from the casino operators. And you'll see as we go along, there has been that kind of contact. A little bit more on the designation. There are provisions that the Commission has under its authority to ensure that these steps are taken, that their surrounding communities, impacted communities, have that ability to get that designation. The primary responsibility is with the casino operator to include that in an application.
Right.
However, there are other procedures where if the community could make a decision that they could, if it's not in the final application, they could make a decision to put a community in and have them designated that way. They could also allow for, if there's negotiations between the casino operator and a surrounding impacted community proposed, they could allow for an additional 30 days of negotiation for that. There's a deadline with this application process of December 31st, 2013, for the applicants to submit their final application, which would include surrounding impacted community designations. So that's, by my count, 7 weeks to go.
Yeah.
Very compact timeline, to say the least. East Longmeadow is obviously applying to become a surrounding impacted community, and that has been a main focus of our efforts for much of the year. This would allow for us, again, to negotiate for those costs that the town may bear because of having being next to a community that has a casino in it. Costs like increases in public safety, perhaps social services, pressures on housing and growth, and in turn perhaps increases in demands for school services, and even effects on perhaps the business community at large. So there's a lot of different areas that the town, at least, believes that a casino, being a surrounding impacted community, could have on town government and the business community. Mm-hmm. Now, funding sources, how does this get paid for? In the preliminary, and I'm using the word preliminary here to sort of cut down on the jargon, but the preliminary, we're in the preliminary phase right now. This is with the where studies come about. Now, there are approximately $50,000 available to pay for studies relative to for example, traffic or economic impact, to assist with those studies to the communities that are making application for this designation. We, in East Longmeadow, were fortunate to receive a $15,000 letter of authorization to cover associated legal costs that might come about with a peer review of a traffic study that the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is conducting on East Longmeadow's behalf and 7 other communities. Now, with the final process, and this would be the one final meaning here that there's an approved applicant and they are operating. So with that process, the annual aggregate amount would be $500,000 for all identified surrounding impacted communities. And in the Springfield Host Community Agreement, these provisions are spelled out in the appendices and in the agreement. It makes reference to that. The amount can be less or more, and there are provisions for that. If it's less, it's my understanding that that goes into a already designated economic development fund or community development fund per the host agreement.
Right. Community Impact Fund, it's called.
Community Impact Fund. And if it's more, there are provisions for that to come out of the funding for the host community agreement with certain guidelines.
Right, where it would be reimbursed in future years when if the impacts are less.
Right. Now, East Longmeadow has been working on this pretty much right from the beginning, and at this point I just would turn it over to George to give you some of the highlights here.
Yeah, I can tell you that ever since the legislation was passed in 2011, the Regional Planning Agency, which is the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, has been heavily involved in trying to understand what the impact of this is going to be, to interpret the regulations that were put out by the state when they came out. They were proactive in getting members of the Gaming Commission and the Ombudsman to come in and speak with the members of the Commission, including myself, and let us know how things were progressing, what the deadlines looked like, and what we could expect to see as the process went forward. In late spring of 2012, town officials, we actually began to informally discuss casino legislation and the potential impacts on East Longmeadow. We did get some guidelines from PVPC as to how we might define those impacts and quantify them so that we'd have something to go on. It was very clear early on that this was not going to be a case where the casino was simply going to cut a check and say, here's some money, have fun with it. It was very clear that they were looking for the actual impacts that they were going to have on the communities, and that they would then be in a position to mitigate those impacts. They weren't going to fix things that were already broken, but they would help take care of things that got worse. So on October 16th in 2012, I met with the Board of Selectmen. We discussed the issue. And on November 5th of 2012, the East Longmeadow officials met with Wilbraham officials to discuss common approaches to this. And I can also say that I've been in contact with and communication with the people in Longmeadow as well, so that the surrounding towns are talking to each other, so that we're not doing this in isolation and in competition, but rather sharing our concerns and sharing what we learn. Because all of these small towns have similar issues, although traffic issues in particular are specific to the towns depending on what roads go through them. And there was a meeting held a little less than a year ago on December 12th, 2012, where East Longmeadow officials, including some of the Board of Selectmen, attended a meeting at PVPC to get the latest information on this. And then this year, the Casino Ombudsman, Mr. Ziemba, was at the PVPC in January and again met with local town officials. The role of the ombudsman is really to work between the casinos and the host communities and surrounding communities. He reports to the Gaming Commission, so he is well aware of what the regulations and the issues and the way the Gaming Commission is interpreting those are. But he's also he's in a position to help the towns negotiate the process, and that's what he's been trying to do. You can see we had meetings throughout the year, and starting, in April, Angela Thorpe was appointed as the liaison for Casino Impact, and starting in September, we started having meetings every other week between the department heads, myself, and Selectman Thorpe, to start really putting down on paper what we thought the impacts were going to be, trying to keep on top of this, because we knew that the casino needs to have signed agreements by December 31st in order to get their final application into the state. Not having those agreements would weaken their application significantly in the eyes of the Gaming Commission, and so they have an incentive to make that happen. But we also understood that the timing is very short, and that if we wait for them to give us a proposed agreement, there isn't going to be a whole lot of time to do a lot of research as to whether or not it's reasonable after the fact. So we needed to start getting those discussions going early on. We got the letter from MGM authorizing up to $15,000 for legal expenses, and that is a good indication that we're being considered as a potential surrounding impacted community. And then we, at town meeting, of course, we got authorization to hire a consultant, and up to
If I could just,
yeah, please.
Just going back just on
Sure.
two meetings, just to point those out. Back in April,
Right.
MGM met with the Board of Selectmen in April. That was one of their outreach meetings, and then August 5th, there was a meeting here with MGM officials and town officials to discuss all of these types of issues. I just want to bring those out
Right,
in particular.
that's right. So we are in discussions with MGM. They know we're here. They know we're concerned, and they want to work with us. Now, there's been some confusion about the split of traffic from the other issues, and I'd like to just explain that a little bit. Initially, the concept was that Pioneer Valley Planning Commission would work on defining all the impacts for the surrounding communities. However, they needed agreement from MGM to do that. MGM decided that they only wanted to work with PVPC on the traffic issues because they felt that the traffic issues were the regional issues. Those were the issues that extended across town boundaries. And they felt that working with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, there would be one data set that they would be dealing with rather than a whole bunch of different data sets that didn't agree on traffic counts and things like that. And so it was agreed that Pioneer Valley would handle doing a peer review of the MGM traffic study and either validate it or ask for changes in it as a result of that peer review. And that's kicking off later this week. The other issues MGM felt were too specific to each town to have a regional view of it. And so when it comes to things like economic impact, development pressure on the schools, zoning issues, police and fire support for any increase for public safety, and other issues, those would be things that the towns would have to negotiate, would have to define for themselves and negotiate for themselves. And we think we have a fairly good handle on what the issues might be, but our consultant has also brought some new thinking to this and some new ways to approach asking for reasonable accommodations or reasonable mitigations. One of the things, if I might comment here, is that obviously until the casino starts operating, nobody really knows what's going to happen. So this whole process of being designated as a surrounding impacted community is in some ways kind of like an insurance policy. Okay? You hope your house never burns down, But if it does, you want to make sure, first of all, you've got an insurance company to talk to, and second of all, you've documented what you had so that you can then document what you've lost. And that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to document what we have and make sure that MGM knows that they're our insurance company relative to these impacts. And when the impacts occur, if the impacts occur, we then have a basis to go to them and say, look, we now have to have extra police out from midnight to 4 in the morning because we've got people driving in from Springfield who may be slightly more impaired than in the past. We, have suddenly doubled our building permits, and we need additional help to deal with that. Our seniors or other people in town are developing problems because of gambling, and we need to hire people to help them deal with those issues. If we don't get on the list and we don't identify the kinds of issues we're concerned about, then we're not at the table. What we're trying to do here is get at the table to identify what the issues might be so that when the impacts happen, we're in a position to say, yes, we mentioned this and you agreed that we're an impacted community, so let's talk about how much money we need to deal with this. And that's really the process that we're going through right now. We're not going to define all of our issues completely down to the last penny before we see what happens. But we want to be in a position to be able to define those impacts after they happen and go to get the mitigation money. So next steps?
So the next steps, the Board of Selectmen awarded a contract to Michael Albano and Associates to conduct an economic impact study. The consultant who is with us this evening, and I'm sure would be available to answer some questions if there are any, has been meeting with town officials and department heads, and will be meeting with the business community very shortly to get this information for the study, and as George was saying, has already come up with some preliminary ideas and how to approach that and how to present that so that when the town enters into those negotiations, it's in its strongest position it can be. The study is due November 26th. That afternoon, the Board of Selectmen meets that evening. That'll be sort of a first blush at it, but from there it will be such that they will be looking at that and making decisions on that, I would think, in somewhat rapid fashion in the next couple of weeks.
I would expect
December.
that, yeah.
Yep. The traffic study, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission has hired the firm of Greenman Peterson to conduct that peer review, and there will be a kickoff meeting of the communities this Thursday. And again, that review will come back to the Board of Selectmen, and I'm sure that they will share that information with other town officials, and similarly look at that and make that part of the negotiation process for the surrounding impacted community status. Then comes, again, what this is all leading up to is that negotiation period, and this needs to be done by December 31st. And with that, we've come to the end of the presentation period, and we'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have. Anyone?
How many other communities are involved in an impact study? Do you think will be considered?
We're looking at all of the communities that are abutting to Springfield.
How many?
So it's like 9, I think.
9.
Yeah.
Only going to allow $500,000 as an aggregate number a year for the impact.
Yeah.
So you're talking maybe $120,000 a piece, $110,000 a piece, not even $50,000 a piece. Annually, one cop. That's basically right. What you're saying?
This is the way the host agreement is written is $500,000 for the surrounding community impacts. Not every community is going to be impacted the same. We're going to be basically, it's like asking for a grant. There's a certain amount of money available, and we're asking for a grant, Longmeadow's asking for a grant, Wilbraham's asking for a grant. How the money gets divided up depends on the quality of our ask. Okay, we have to ask for this money.
So the pot of money is only $500,000 for everyone.
That's the fund. There is additional money available if the impacts are demonstrated to be greater.
How much?
Well, according to Appendix D here, and this is all legalese, so
And does that include the traffic? That's all issues, $500,000.
yeah. And the issue on, for instance, traffic is how do you mitigate traffic? Typically, you do that by upgrading roads or signals, and that's a one-time issue, okay? It's a one-time expense. Public safety is a different issue, okay? If you need to hire additional police officers, let's say, because of the additional either crime or DUI or whatever you want to call it, okay, that's an ongoing issue.
But also, as you said, social services for
Right.
gambling issues.
And that's
So
something that,
$500,000.
and
That's what's locked in?
no, it's not locked in, okay? Let me get the details here, okay? This is legalese, but there's also Gaming Commission tax revenues, which will go to surrounding communities, okay? Which is in addition to that fund that's coming out of the out of the casino directly, okay? And let's see, trying to read this. It's 15% of the tax revenue will go to Transportation, Infrastructure, and Development Fund. 5% will go to a Public Health Trust Fund. And then under the, here we have, in the event annual payments to be made by the developer under all surrounding community agreements are greater than the annual cap during any casino year, the developer shall pay 100% of such payments, but an amount equal to 50% of such excess shall be credited against each community impact percentage payment unless otherwise required to be made by the developer in the casino year immediately following the casino year in which the annual payment excess applies. So, okay, this was written by a lawyer, you know. The point is that if we don't get involved with this, we get nothing.
I understand that, and
Yeah.
I hope East Longmeadow gets the best piece it
Yeah.
can. You know, but it's 14 days to put the package together, right? By the 20-something, 27th, what's the date, 27th? You have to have the package together. Then it's gotta be negotiated before the end of, within 4 weeks after that.
Right. And so as I say,
You're gonna have all the studies done for all the pieces?
as I say, this is sort of like an insurance policy, okay? We're identifying what the issues are. We're putting together a projected ask. If we do get designated as a surrounding community, then as we demonstrate the actual impacts in the future, that's how we get the mitigation money. Okay, if and I should
But
add,
I believe what you said, the mitigation money
yeah,
is, half of it comes out of the amount that's going to be paid to us anyway.
Not-
That's what you just
I'm
read.
not sure what you mean. Half is coming out.
What you read, what you just
That's
read.
that's the excess. That's the excess over the cap.
Okay.
Okay. I've lost my train of thought here now. But as I say, it's, you know, we need to get at the table in order to be able to ask for anything. There is also a provision. Now, should MGM choose to leave us out of this, We can appeal to the Gaming Commission, okay, to get designated as a community by the Gaming Commission. But to do that, again, we need to be able to demonstrate that we anticipate impacts. We can't just go to the Gaming Commission and say, hey, we're on the border of Springfield, we ought to be designated. Okay, we really need to be able to counter any argument that MGM might have that we would not be impacted. I mean, I've seen the study that was done for the Palmer Casino for the surrounding communities, and it was that was done by Mohegan Sun, and it was pretty poor. It's really up to the communities to stand up and say, hey, we need to be noticed, we need to be listened to. Over here, Don?
Thank you. I took a little time to read the, is it Chapter 23K in the Mass General Law pertaining to the expansion of the Gaming Commission's regulations.
Right.
I didn't read it the way it was presented here tonight. I could have misread it, but I don't believe the $500,000 cap is realistic or is consistent with what I read. There's no way that 9 communities surrounding this behemoth that is going in Springfield that's going to gross over $400 million a year, and for which Springfield is going to get $51 million, $15 million up front and $26 million every year thereafter, to have us surrounding communities share in a measly $500,000. That makes no sense, and it is not consistent with how I read the rules and the law of this act. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The cap, by the way, is not in the law or the regulations. It's in the host agreement that was negotiated between MGM and Springfield. And as you all probably know, the towns were not part of that negotiation at all. We were totally cut out of what happened between Springfield and MGM. Now we're having to deal with that agreement as it stands.
We don't have to do anything that is not consistent with our best interest.
I agree. Other questions?
I'd just like to make a couple of comments, and the first comment would be if we're having to expend so much time, effort, and money to protect our interests, then number one, why are casinos such a great deal for cities in the Commonwealth? That's the first question. But the second question is a comment that the town of East Longmeadow does have to expend time, effort, and money to protect its interests. Because if MGM does come to Springfield, they have committed they're going to divide up $500,000 amongst the surrounding communities based on the percent of the impact to each of those communities. That's year one. Let's say all of a sudden people decide, well, this is not such a great place to go to after all, and the income to MGM falls off. They're not going to have the $500,000 in year two and subsequent years following that. And then they get to a point where with many of the casinos, or the casinos in Connecticut already are in, where they're in bankruptcy, then they get sold off to someone else. That someone else isn't necessarily going to be bound by the agreements made by MGM in the first place, and that's going to leave all of the cities or the towns surrounding Springfield, if Springfield does get a casino, and that's not a done deal already, it's going to leave them in the lurch for, what is it, a 75-year period that the license would be granted? That's my understanding. So our grandchildren's grandchildren will still be faced with the problem of the casino if in fact it turns out to be a problem.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. I'm not going to comment on whether it's good or bad because I'm not in a position to do that. As I say, nothing is guaranteed except death and taxes. We can just do the best we can to position ourselves, and part of the one good thing I see is that we have a very strong gaming commission with strong powers, okay? And it's up to them to make sure that the agreements are honored. And that, you know, that's where we're coming from. Other questions or comments? Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And, you know, if you do have thoughts or you run into people who want to express their thoughts, feel free to get in contact with either me or the Board of Selectmen. We really need to know how the town is thinking and what concerns people have so that we're not overlooking anything that specific concerns that people might have other than what we've already highlighted. So, you know, feel free to contact us and let us know your thoughts. We may not be able to make you happy, and we may not be able to answer all your concerns, but at least we want people to understand what's actually going on, that this is not happening, you know, in some smoke-filled room. We're trying to be as transparent as we can about the process, and also to make sure that we listen to folks' concerns and do the best we can to address those. So, thank you.
Mr. Kingston,
Yeah.
when the report, or our claim for reimbursement is finalized, will it be published?
It would be my recommendation to the board to do so.
And that would be a public document. So,
Right.
yeah, it would be available, and with any luck, we can get it on the website.
Yep.
And the Springfield host agreement is available somewhere, I think on the Springfield website or on the MGM website, if you need to look at it.
I read it tonight.
Okay. And certainly, as Nick pointed out, the massgaming site has got a ton of information about this whole process. So it's great. If you need more detail, you pointed out that, you know, the law the law, this is the law, okay, that was passed, okay, right here. So you can see this is not something that, you know, is simple, that you're going to be able to read and understand completely at first blush. So if you are concerned, the information is out there. You got to dig for it, though. So please do.
Could I just make one more comment? And that is, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is blessed in that we have the right as citizens to petition that a law that we might not agree with get changed or repealed. And the young lady to my left and I are part of a group here in the Commonwealth who are requesting that folks sign a petition which will place on next November's ballot a law that would prohibit the Massachusetts Gaming Commission from issuing any license for a casino or other gaming establishment to operate in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Anybody here tonight who would like to sign this petition will help us get to the 80,000 signatures we need by a week from tomorrow, the 20th of this month. These signatures need to be into the registrars and clerk's offices in the cities and towns. This is a way for the people to have the ability in Hamden and Wilbraham and Northampton and Adams throughout the Commonwealth to say, we want to have casinos, but we don't want to have casinos. To let us decide to debate the question and vote on it.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. And
I'm sorry, when's the next public meeting going to be? Is there going to be another public meeting at all? Or?
there probably will be, but I can't tell you when. There will be a meeting with local businessmen, 2 meetings actually this Friday. And if you're interested in that, talk to Mr. Albano. If you're a local businessman and want to talk about economic impact. Also, this will obviously be discussed at the Board of Selectmen meetings going forward through the rest of the year. And you're all welcome to come to Board of Selectmen meetings or to watch them on TV when they're broadcast. So, you know, all of the detailed discussions will be done at public meetings of the Board of Selectmen. So, you know, they will be out there. It's not going to. I'm sure that the negotiations, that's under the Board of Selectmen to decide how they're going to do that. And I can't comment on what that process exactly will be. But we're hoping that that will happen soon. Thank you. And we'll be around if you want to talk privately afterwards.